Hello, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 3 of season 3 of Psychopaths. You can tell that this series is on my brain because I recently just did a reaction for an episode of Pluto, and there was a very similar kind of gladiator scene to what we saw with the guy running for governor, and I actually got the two series mixed up, and I was like, wait a minute, no! So mid-reaction, I'm like, I'm thinking of Psychopaths, no! So that's where we're at, but oh my gosh, I am so invested in this series in terms of the mystery, in terms of stuff that the show is laying out that I'm like, okay, I understand that. And then stuff that I'm like, I have no clue what this is and where this is going, which is really exciting. But I am even more invested now that I know the voice actors for this season. What? So let's talk about that. I got some comments I want to go to. Nastia pointed out that Hinakawa's voice actor, I forgot this, is the same as Mikishima. It's the same voice actor. It's Sakurai. It's the same voice actor. And I was like, wait, what? So, because, you know, Mikishima, after he died, that's when Hinakawa appeared in the series, so it makes sense they were never in the same place twice. It's just Sakurai's voice transforms so much and is so subtle for Hinakawa. That, or Hinakawa just never talks in comparison to Mikishima, who is like, let me tell you about my book club every 5 seconds. So maybe that's it. But beyond that, Anime Annie pointed out, yes, Yuki Kaji is the voice actor for Shindo. I'm so excited. I love that. But beyond that, we talked about how Kei has the same voice actor as Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen, and I was like, oh, Kei is so subtle and stoic and reserved. He seems nothing like Gojo's character, and I'm used to Gojo's voice actor playing more eccentric characters, so that's interesting to me. I don't know all of Gojo's voice actors' roles, so maybe he does play some more down-to-earth, subtle characters, but I was like, oh, that's unusual. But also, Erie's voice actor is Suwabe? What? Junichi Suwabe is Erie's voice actor? How did I not notice? What? It makes sense. Erie's character is very much like Grimmjow from Bleach for me, so I could see Suwabe voice acting him. He's not quite as, like, dorky as Aomine from Kroger's Basketball, but definitely has the Grimmjow-esque attitude. So now I'm going to be, like, all ears listening to that. But also, Todoroki's voice actor is All For One from My Hero Academia. What? So I'm like, how did I miss these? Kisaragi's is Margaret from Bungo Stray Dogs, and Nania from Case Study of Vanitas, and I could see that now. Honestly, Psychopaths is like my current Bungo Stray Dogs comparison, just with hotter male leads. I don't mean to insult Bungo Stray Dogs, but honestly, the 3 main characters of Bungo Stray Dogs that I'm, like, remotely attracted to, one is about as shady as Mikishima, one is dead, and the other one in this world would be a latent criminal behind bars. And I'll let you figure out in the comments which 3 I'm talking about. So, but yeah, this is like my Bungo Stray Dogs equivalent right now, and I'm living for it. I'm all about it. So I get the same upbeat positivity that I get from Bungo Stray Dogs when I was reacting to it. So I look forward to this every week. But also Homura, who is the guy that we saw going into the triad of whatever it is. We don't know what the hell this is. I'm like, are they in a microchip? Is this the Matrix? Is this the antagonist that's trying to rival Sybil System? Is it just a facet of Sybil System? We don't know. They're not telling us at this point. But his voice actor is Miyano Mamoru. Now, that right there, I know it's not a spoiler, but let's be real. Miyano Mamoru, in every role that I've seen him in, he don't play no side character. He don't play no side hustle. Miyano, if he's going to get involved, is going to play a character that has something going on. So he's going to have a bigger role later. I'm like, Miyano Mamoru didn't just sign up for like a 1-episode character that speaks 5 lines. No, that diva did not. So I'm sure that he's going to have a bigger part to play in all of this. But we kind of knew that to begin with before the voice actor information, so it's fine. But yeah. So, Sayonji, who is the girl that's in the group, also plays Hanami from Jujutsu Kaisen, which Hanami is kind of like an androgynous curse in that series. And Shirogane plays the old man. He also plays old man Ukai from Haikyuu. I'm sure he's just an innocent little old man. And then the AI voice during the round robin is the same voice actor as Ishin from Bleach and Tosin, as well as Ruth Vin from Vanitas, Poe from Bungo Stray Dogs, and Thorgil from Vinland Saga. I'm like, what? And then Asusawa plays Eduardo from Banana Fish and Toby from Naruto. That is a stacked cast for this season. Like, spared no expense to get some damn good voice actors to come in on this. Like, we're just missing Hosoya, and we got this, but we already had him back as Cho, so it's like, what can we do now, right? What can we do? But if Mikishima can come back and play Hinakawa, so can Hosoya, so... Why not? Or not Hosoya, but you know who I'm talking about, who plays Dio from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Hosoya, I'm thinking of playing Reiner, or we have enough good voice actors. I have many others that I'm thinking in my head whose voice names will not come out, but this is a pretty stacked cast. So thank you, Anime Annie. I'm like, what the heck? Also, Anime Annie pointed out that Mika's entire black office giving off some Togani vibes, you know, like with the whole paint it black sort of thing. Here's my thing about Mika that's kind of interesting at this point. At the beginning of season 3, in episode 1, we're only on episode 3, but it feels like so much has happened in the last 2 weeks. In episode 1, I was kind of like, I don't know how to feel about Mika. I don't know if she's like completely gone over to the dark side in the last 3 years, but then she helps out Ganoza, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe she's not totally gone to the dark side. She probably still is. Maybe she's working for Akane and them. I don't know. But then there's that Togani comment about painting the office black, and I'm like, but has she gone to the dark side? Is she hiding up her own clouded hue? Is she still okay? I don't know. So that's all very interesting to me. There's a lot still left unsaid. And last episode, Shindo, he met another mentalist who just happens to be running for governor that will have a major part to play in the civil system. So that's interesting as well. There's just a lot going on. There's a lot going on. This episode's coming out on Patreon on my birthday. So as a pre-birthday celebration, since I'm recording, obviously, before the 8th, we put some adult beverage in here. You'll notice it's a bigger cup. Yes. For reasons. But I'm super excited, y'all. I'm super excited to see what we get in this episode. The mystery of this season has been so much fun. One other thing, I think I noted it last episode, but this season actually came out in 2019, not 2023. And I was like, that makes so much more sense. I think Sunspots pointed that out, because at first I was like, wait, this series came out in 2023, which was last year, and then they had like at least a movie or something else come out the same year. That seems a lot condensed in one time frame. No, this came out in 2019, which means there was time for the other two pieces of Psycho-Pass media that I've still yet to see had time to come out. So I'm like, okay, that makes more sense. That makes me at least excited about the other pieces of media beyond this season, because if I found out they all came out in the same year, when studios tend to rush projects like that, they tend not to come out well. So that gives me more hope. That makes me feel 1,000 times better knowing that. I'm like, thank you. I'm like, streaming service, get your dates fixed. So that reactors aren't confused. But I've talked enough. I've wasted too much time. I am so ready to dive in, y'all. You all have no idea, or maybe you do. So we're going to not waste any more time. We're going to jump into Psycho-Pass Season 3, Episode 3. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's do it to it, y'all. Remember how this is my favorite episode? This is definitely my favorite episode of the season, which is crazy because there was not Akane, Kogami, or Ganoza in it, or Sugo. So it's like, how? But it is. I'm gonna posit some truth with y'all. I was really nervous in episode 1 because the favorites that we've had the entire series so far, like Kogami and Ganoza and Sugo, who are like the fan favorites, and then Akane of all people, who's like the one character I was like empathizing and relating to the most. Those 4 characters that I've come to know and love are nowhere in sight. One is in prison. Apparently Akane killed someone? What? So that was a thing. Apparently. We're going to look into that, although it's Psycho-Pass, so nothing sometimes things are not what it seems, right? Whiteboard Kun is going to be littered with a lot of graffiti this evening. Let me tell you, I have a feeling already. But I was really worried coming into this season because, you know, you get introduced to Shindo and Kei and Eri and Todoroki, and I was like, I don't know how this feels. Like, I don't know if I'm going to like these characters. And it's new, and you're like, I don't know what to do because it's just, and it's Mika in charge of them, who has now become a parody of herself in the best way possible. And we're going to talk about her. But I honestly didn't know. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to feel about this. And then last episode, I was like, okay, starting to come around. This episode, oh, I'm all in. Maybe it's the fact that Anime Annie has pointed out the amazing voice talents of these individuals, but they kind of get on display this episode. I'm on board wholeheartedly. Like, I'm all in for the 4 new characters that have come in to replace the 4 that I really liked. And then finding out Kunozuka is alive. Oh my God. I was so sure that she was dead, but she's a freelance journalist? That means her psychopath was cleared. What? So, there is still so much mystery. I am so baffled. I have so much I want to know. The idea that we're going to have Kunozuka helping out next episode. All the accolades. And they're trying, Hinakawa has been trying to figure out information about Shindo and Kei and relating it to the others. I love that Eri called him senpai. Oh my God. But there's so much to love about this episode. There is so much going on. And there are so many questions. I'm like, wait, what is this? You're now connecting this to this to this? Huh? So, okay. Whiteboard Kun is going to break down lots of things. And we're just going to have to go along with it. But there was so much happening in this episode. And it's all like hitting all the beats so good. I'm like, yes, absolutely. And the thing about it is, you would think I would be frustrated by this not knowing what the hell Bifrost is or what's going on. But they're slowly feeding us like a little IV drip of information that I'm like, okay, when it all comes out by the end, it's going to make sense. Maybe. And it's going to be like, oh, okay. I like the way that they're doing it, that they're giving us little tiny crumbs, just enough to make us remember what we already know, but not giving it away. I'm like, it's not giving it away. It feels pretty much like, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I'm intrigued. Okay, so let's start off, I guess, we're going to put Bifrost up here. Whatever the hell Bifrost is. Whatever it is, it seems to be trying to avoid Sybil. It's trying to avoid the Sybil system because it doesn't want to be noticed. So that's interesting. I like the idea of this rival. This whole season is kind of about opposing forces and dualities and binaries. The fascinating thing about it, now that we've seen the OP, is you have, like, I was wondering about the color purple and why Shindo was red-eyed and Kei was blue-eyed, because I was like, well, Kei has blue eyes, but Shindo doesn't have red eyes. His eyes are like a yellow color, like a hazel. No, it's because their powers combine to create the ultimate detective duo that finds the foxes, and that's purple. So it's like you have red with Shindo and blue with Kei. When you combine those two colors, it equals purple. As I spit everywhere, it equals purple, which is the color that they use of the foxes to hunt them. So I'm like, huh. So let's talk about this. We have this concept of binaries and non-binaries, as it so happens in this episode. God, I love Psycho-Pass so much. Love it. So we have these idea of binaries where we have the Bifrost versus a Sybil system. You have the Suku, we're going to get their name on here a little bit. We're going to get Kamiya versus the Yukushiji. Is that right? Theirs is the one name that I have a little trouble with because I'm like, they have those two together. And then here's the thing. We have the inspectors versus the inspectors. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Inspectors / enforcers. We're going to talk about that. And then we have Shindo. Here's the thing, though. Shindo and Kei. By all accounts, from what we know of Shindo and Kei's past, they should be against each other. They should be enemies. They should not want to work together. And then we also have this idea, we can't forget this, about the foreign immigrants versus the natural, or I'm going to have to, nationalists is basically it, nationalists, which we're going to talk about. So we have this, and my head is going to cover up Shindo and Kay. So we have these 4 different groups of binaries that are here, right? We also have the idea of the underground versus the public. And then we have over here, we have Shindo and Kay. And by all accounts, Shindo and Kay, from their story that we get from Hinakawa, they should be against each other. They should not be working together, right? But they are. And the thing about it is, they're working together because they see the common, overarching, actual villain. I feel like both Kay, who has had family members killed, and supposedly killed by Shindo's father, who committed suicide, but it's class 3 level, under surveillance, nobody can know that information. I feel like both of them got together, and the Sybil system or other forces would rather them have destroyed each other, but instead of destroying each other, they got together and went like, hey, wait a minute, why would we try to kill each other? What if both of our families were set up by the system, and we're just, suffering their loss, and they were victims, but the big culprit is the system at large, and we need to find out the truth of what went down and how the system works. I feel like they're trying to find out the truth of the Sybil system because it caused them to lose their families. And instead of being against each other, they work together. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And they have this network, and it works really good together. And I think it's a really good symbolic example of, instead of letting circumstances pitting us against one another, if we work together, our powers combined, Captain Planet style, then we're actually stronger united than we are divided. I think that Shindo and Kay are a perfect example of, instead of fighting one another, combining your forces and being even stronger than before. I think that's a perfect example of that. So lots of binaries we're going to talk about in this and otherwise, but I'm so in love with this episode. But okay, let's go back to Bifrost. So we have the idea of the dealer. So it's this triangle formation. They are placing bets and gambling. So we know that. Everyone gets a turn at being the dealer. And for this time around, it was Homura, who is played by Miyano Mamoru. The moment that he started talking in this episode, I was like, oh, you are Miyano Mamoru. He talks more in this episode than he has the whole series so far. So Miyano. I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. They're like, I'll be the dealer. And they're like, best regards. And they're like, so what cards are you living on now? Okay, so they all have, there's 3 different colors. There's like a fuchsia, there's blue, and there is like a golden color, which red, blue, and yellow, they're your 3 primary colors. Okay, so we have primary colors. And of course, there's 3. So they make a note of saying, what cards are you living on? Okay. I want to go through this conversation before I talk about it a little bit. And then from there, they say you must have a good hand. And he's like, well, I'll leave that to your imagination. So there's the idea that they have hands of cards. Okay, tied to what they can make deals with and wager. So they're like, case number... Okay, so the case number that they do is the same one that Arasawa finds out on, which is 10785, which is a case number. Okay, and they say inspect, relation, start. Inspect relation has the little capital letters under it, like it's something that's going to happen. So then this like column goes down and they form the diagram that I think is connected to Arasawa, right? It's connected to it. And they're like, debate. So the case thing is dealing with the debate between Kamiya versus the leading candidate is Karina Kamiya. So she's in the lead at this point in this. And it looks like behind them there's all these gears and different, like, it looks like they're inside a machine is what it looks like. And the security item. So there's the debate of what, it didn't say who she was up against for the debate, though. I want to go back real quick for a hot second. I want to go back here. So I want to go back and find this. So the debate is leading candidate Kamiya, what is her name? Karina Kamiya. So all it is the debate is leading candidate, that she's in the lead. That is the issue. And then it says security item is the election. So security item is the election. So the debate is, should she be the winner of the election? That is the debate, right? Should she win? And then it says the relation block. Okay. The relation block is Division 1. Okay, inspect relations. So they're the ones involved in all of this. And we see, okay, so we see down there are multiple people on here, right? So we see the one Tsuchiya guy has like a little dead stamp across him, like he's dead. Then we have the two candidates. We have somebody with long black hair. Is that supposed to be Kunazuka? And then we see the candidates there, and it looks like the one person, Mia is involved as well. What the fudge? So yeah. And then they say, now it's finally time. This will be a major turning point for us at Bifrost. So whatever happens here is considered to be a turning point. Like, okay, God hand. All right, laws of causality. All right. Sure. Now, in this moment, it looks like there is these massive towers, right? So I'm like, where the hell are they? Because there is the tower that is like the tower that's running the bureau, right? But then beside them, are they in the conspicuous, oddly shaped white towers that are right next to the division? Is that where they are? Are they right next door? Bungo Stray Dogs indeed. Okay. So we're going to skip the intro since now we know it. All right. And we have the major HERACLES and the SIRENS. Well, HERACLES seems like it's referring to Hercules or its other name. And the SIRENS, I thought the SIRENS were talking about Kamiya and her group. And it was going to be like his group versus her group because there's a lot of binaries in this episode. But sirens are also mythical creatures that lure you in with their song before they kill you. So it could very well instead be referring to our inspectors getting drawn closer and closer into the case. Very curious. Very curious. I'm so fascinated by this episode. Okay, so let's talk about Lee, R.I.P. Lee. That death, can we talk about that death for a hot second? It's not happened as I'm going back through this episode, but oh my God, that was just the most brutal, blood, kicked his face in. Oh my God. It was like Game of Thrones-esque, and I was not expecting it. I thought they were going to knock him out. I thought they were going to kick his face. I thought they were going to like make him unconscious, maybe stab him or something, but I didn't think that he was just going to get his head completely annihilated. Nope. That was just the most quick and disturbing death. It was insane. So, okay. So Tsuchiya, they're questioning Kei and Todoroki. What I like that this episode really does too is it doesn't have to explain every little thing. Even when they tell you at the end, like when we find out Todoroki's actually related to the family that works there for, Yukishiji, it's not something that immediately comes out. I just thought that at first Todoroki was mad because he had to be like in this questioning ceremony because he's a grumpy older man. Also, he's not that old, apparently. Apparently, he's just aged horribly after everything that's happened to him. Holy shit. Which is realistic. Not everybody gets the good genes. Am I right? So they question him everything. I like just these random things. Like there's like a gift basket with like coffee cups and there's just random flowers everywhere. I suppose they're all gifts for Yukishiji, I suppose. But the one guy's like, is that all you want? And they're like, did candidate Kamiya, she's in the lead. Do you have a plan to turn that around? And he's just like, well, ask my first secretary Lee about that. Like, he loved Lee, was like all about him. And Lee's just like, well, that was anticipated. And she seems to be ahead in Sybil System's political suitability as well. And they're like, it's a negligible difference. And he's like, I won't deny that I'm losing, but I might have overcome strict daily training and many deadly struggles. My Hugh will triumph in the end. And then I like that he's like, is martial arts really going to cure your Hugh? And that gets Yukishiji's attention, because he's like, and then he slaps him and tells him, wake up. So he's like, love yourself, fight for it. Don't give up just because you're a latent criminal. It's not too late. Live strong. His eyes are so anime. They're so over exaggerated and crazy, which he kind of reminds me of in his design. We've talked about how he was like genetically formed to be like this perfect being. Like his parents like were selected to have this perfect child. It's almost like, but it's over exaggerated a little bit. It reminds me a little bit about like when the royals like inbred to have, you know, the perfect pure bloodline, but their kids ended up looking a little deformed because you're not supposed to do that. So yeah, it kind of has that same kind of feeling to it in a weird way. Here's the thing. Yukishiji is interesting. He definitely, after this episode, seems more like a scapegoat and mouthpiece. He does not seem like a mastermind. Whereas what's funny is, and we'll kind of go back to this, Kamiya is the sly one. Kamiya, who seems like just the humble little pop star princess, seems like she's the one that's the mentalist. She's the one that's sly, and she's the one that right now has the advantage, or had the advantage until the whole thing with Lee came out, right? Until that all happened. Meanwhile, which we'll talk about, meanwhile, Yukishiji, he seems a lot more of a yes man. He seems more of a yes man, and he seems more likely to be a scapegoat, but he also seems more of the morally commendable. He doesn't seem as sly as her anymore. At first I thought it was maybe just an act or something, because he seems kind of like this big brute that would be, you know, like a strong man. And he is, but he's kind of simple. And I was waiting for it to show like that he was actually really cunning, but I don't think that's the case. I think he's literally like One for All. He's just this nice guy that was born under these like preferential circumstances, and he's been privileged. But he seems like kind of oblivious to the privilege. Does that make sense? Because he really cares for Lee, and Lee notices and commends him because he accepts people like him. And Lee is noted at being a foreigner, which is interesting. So it's interesting to me because Yukishiji seems very much like he doesn't care if you're a foreigner. Everyone's all equal under his mind. If we all just wrestle, we can solve world peace. Like, he seems like that kind of person. And I could see where he could get a cult following. The hilarious thing is that he's, you know, got this cult following, and he's literally fighting robots to clear his hue and keep his hue clear. So you would think, as someone that engages in violence so often, that he wouldn't be the more morally commendable one compared to the pop princess singing Kumbaya and let's all hold hands and be friends. But instead, she seems to come across in this episode as the more sly and intimidating and maybe evil one, if that's even a case. Or with Bifrost, this could all just be a giant social experiment to see what the masses will do, and to further use it as a means of control, right? If neither party is ideal, we're just going to have them fight each other to the death and kill each other and just see what the masses end up going with, and we'll use that as part of our manipulation. Seems to be it. But I really thought we were going to get a lot more with Kamiya in this episode. I really thought, especially when we saw the title, that we were going to have her in here. She's not here at all. They are conveniently trying to have us forget about her, because right now we need to focus on Yukishiji and what's going on with them. So we'll come back to that. And see where that goes. But we find out that the Todorokis are involved. Can we talk about the fact that the Todoroki, I mean, Tima clearly takes after his father. His father, like, has aged a lot, and Timma seems to take after him. His brother is, like, freaking young and got the good genes of the family. I'm sorry, Timma. The brother got the good genes, which is really sad, because it doesn't seem that long since they last saw him, and they call him a failure. I'm like, dude. And I like the one guy seems, I was like, there's a story there. And Kay's like, so an enforcer has relatives working on the Yakushiji campaign. The Yakushiji, there we go. Meanwhile, we see the pictures of Kamiya looking very angelic, which, I don't know. I think that it's a nice play on subverting our expectations, because Yakushiji seems like the devilish one, but he may have the heart of gold, and she seems like the angelic one who might be like the succubus in disguise. How fitting that we would subvert it, right? But again, she may be totally fine, and this could all be a red herring. I don't know. Meanwhile, we have our dear boy Shindo looking like L from Death Note. Speaking of Miyano Mamoru, I feel like Shindo and L would get along swimmingly. They'd both sit with their legs crossed, they'd eat sweets, and they'd have a grand old time. That seems to be the case. But what do they talk about here? They're like, Tsuchiya specialized in neuroscience, particularly self-control via stereotypes in the decision-making process. What? So, so with Kamiya, she had a Tsuchiya working for her that used self-control and decision-making neuroscience. That seems like stuff you could use in PR and to try to persuade the voting masses. Maybe, possibly, I don't know. And so then Shindo talks about from there, and I like that Erie's like, what? Erie says, what does that mean? Okay, Erie has won me over. I didn't like Erie at all in episode 1. Erie and Timma in episode 1, I did not like them at all. And I was like, are we going to be stuck with these guys the whole season? This episode completely won me over with Timma and with Erie. Timma's whole thing with his family, oh my God. Like, just, again, it's like Ganoza 2.0, which we'll talk about. But Erie won me over. Erie is like, what if Sasayama got more backstory? That's what Erie reminds me of. It's like, what if we gave Sasayama some more personality and a backstory? That seems to be Erie, and I fell for them this episode, because they are a perfect Sawabe character. Now it makes sense why he agreed to play this character, because on the outside, Erie looks very rough, he looks rugged, he looks very rough and tumble, like ready to go and get in a brawl, but then Shindo immediately sees under the surface and sees the heart that is hidden deep within our Erie. I wouldn't call him a Tin Man or a Cowardly Lion. I think Timma's more the Cowardly Lion, but Erie's kind of like Tin Man. He's got the heart deep inside, and he wants to he's kind of like, Erie is sort of a Sasayama and Kogami mix, where he wants to do right by the people, and he has his own sense of justice, but it's kind of warped and distorted because he's an enforcer and because he grew up in the underground. So I like Erie. I like Erie a lot after this episode. He really, really grew on me. So yeah, he's like, what does that mean? And Shindo's like, well, one experiments with negative and positive stereotypes. And it goes like this. So I liked it. Okay, he looks in. He makes the little diagram with these creepy but cute. Okay, the little psychopath robots, their expressions, oh my God. The little ones that have the little kissy faces, and the ones that just have the blank faces, they're like this. I could make so many emojis. I could just sit here and just squeal all day over these cute little faces. At first I was like, they are creepy as hell, but now they've grown on me. I've slowly Stockholm syndrome into finding them endearing. But they're so cute. I just they're adorable. They're distractingly adorable, and I don't like it. But they go into the two academic groups. So what they're saying is basically it's like PR. He was doing public relations to see let's do our test groups. Group A that are poor students, and Group B that are called the advanced class, and see how they do. So they're like, okay, if we play with the negative stereotype, and I've actually seen this in practice, it's why I hate tracking in schools. It drives me crazy. Because how tracking works, if you're an educator and you're in the field of education, you may not have known this growing up, but a lot of American schools use tracking with their classes. And what that means is a lot of schools in my area, well, they'll start out in kindergarten and kind of see how you do. And the kids that are more advanced get placed into one class, and the kids that are less than stellar or have behavioral issues or don't learn as well, they're placed in the other group. And the idea behind it, in theory, is that your advanced class won't be held back by people that are struggling. And the idea is basically with tracking, on paper, it sounds legit. Because on paper, the idea is, and I'm going to run out of space on Whiteboard Coon, I already know. But the idea with tracking, I'm going to like just draw it here, is that group A, your idea is that if they are all together in an advanced class, they won't be held back by those that are struggling learning. They'll be able to advance as a group, meaning that it'll be better for everybody as a whole, and there'll be a more positive environment so that they'll be more stimulated and motivated. On paper, that sounds great. That sounds great for the advanced group. That's awesome. And usually in practice with tracking, the advanced group excels. They do really, really good. They do awesome. Amazing. Positive reinforcement all day. And I'm sure that part of the testing group would be if you put somebody that wasn't as advanced in the advanced group, just by that environment, they would probably fare better. And we're going to touch back on that in just a second. We're going to roll back around with that. The problem is that on paper, if you do this tracking method, group B, the argument is, well, they're all ones that struggle with learning. So you would get more time as an instructor to help each kid one-on-one and make them catch up better rather than the student feeling like they're being left behind or that they're struggling. They would feel like they're more involved and they would feel like they're getting more attention and thus would be more motivated to succeed. And plus, they wouldn't feel ostracized because they're all in the same boat. In theory, that idea seems like a really good idea. And you're like, oh yeah, this would have a lot of benefits. This would have a lot of benefits. Here's the problem, because I have subbed a lot of classes that go by that tracking system. And I spent years substitute teaching. So I've seen this at the grade school level and what ends up happening. While in theory, that sounds great, the problem is, yeah, this group A over here, they're going to do great. And they're technically group B in Psychopaths in the episode. But group B, one, your instructor does not have time to help 20 kids with a problem as opposed to 5 or 6 kids with a problem. Because when you have a mixed class, yeah, you're going to have some that struggle, but you're also going to be able to take time with those 5 or 6 that struggle and let the other kids like go do some self-exploration, go do their own projects, do stuff like that. And you can focus on those 5 or 6 and catch them up. The problem with this model is this class is going to keep advancing rapidly. This class is going to stop advancing. It's going to be a lot slower to catch up because so much time is being placed to help those kids catch up rather than getting everybody caught up, moving together. One group will advance more quickly. One group is going to get stuck behind because the instructor has to take more time for everyone rather than advancing everybody together as a group. The other problem is, in a lot of systems, kids are not dumb. They figure out very quickly who's in the advanced group and who's in the non-advanced group. And I've seen a lot of kids that aren't motivated because they're like, oh, well, I'm in the dumb class. And I'm like, oh no. And I was like, oh no, you're not in the dumb class. And they're like, well, then why am I here? And these guys are over here and they're the smart kids. And I'm like, and what do you say? So you have to try to be like, well, no, you're here in a different class. It's the class places, but they're not dumb. They figure it out very quickly. And so it doesn't make them not ostracized. Oftentimes they're ostracized more because they get labeled as the B class rather than the A class, and they're treated differently, and it becomes a culture. So yeah, I just went on a tangent. Because this whole A, B thing, I was like, I know I've seen this before, but it's tracking. And it does actually yield very intriguing results. And so, yeah, human nature is a big factor in all this that you can't quite map out on a test board. So whenever Shindo's sitting here talking about, like, having them take the test And what happens that even though either intellectually equal, there's a gap in their scores, right? You have your positive reinforcement versus the negative. And Shindo's like, acting strong is all it takes to make the human brain secrete testosterone, a hormone that encourages risk-taking. I mean, yeah, I said that in the reaction, but what's funny is a lot of people are like, a woman president, her hormones, her emotions. And I'm like, bitch, y'all have testosterone that makes you have huge risk-taking calculative abilities. Shut up. Be quiet. Most serial killers are men. Shut up. So I thought that was interesting. And like in contrast, acting weak causes it to secrete the stress relief hormone called cortisol. So it's like you have one group like, you know, stress relief versus the other one making bigger risks. And he's like, so what does that have to do with the accident? I love that they just bring it all back around. He's like, well, something, I hope. Shindo's like, I hope it is. He's like, I hope that something comes out from this. And he's like, you're fixated on the accident, Inspector. Are you following the orders from the chief? And he's like, oh, well, it's just my intuition. And I like that Erie's like, intuition? Like, what is that? Because Sybil system's kind of gotten rid of intuition. People don't have to think for themselves anymore or follow their guts because the Sybil system just tells them what to do. So they don't have that intuition or that curiosity, right? Meanwhile, we go back to this restaurant that's, you know, this like little restaurant here, this bar, and they're like, I hope she is. We need Karina to keep these people under control. So the talk is about Karina keeping immigrants under control. That's who they're talking about. That they think that she is going to be someone that keeps immigration, you know, reformed, right? Just looking at them clouds my hue. Now it makes sense who she's talking about. She's talking about immigrants clouding their hue. I was wondering who in the world they were talking about, but that's what it is. Yeah. And so then Arasawa goes up to these slightly bigoted women and says, well, good afternoon, young ladies. I couldn't help you flaunting your privilege at my bar. And so he basically says, are you having an English-style afternoon tea? And that's when he says, might I suggest coffee? After all, English tea culture only began because they lost a trade war. So I like that he points out the hypocrisy of these women having their afternoon tea and scones and their little parfaits, that he's like, you do realize, you know, as you're talking about how immigrants are bad and you don't like immigration, that you are actually performing a routine ritual that is imported here from another country by, I don't know, that you know, I guess immigrants would do that here. Like, I love he points out the hypocrisy of what they're saying. Like, you're sitting here indulging in something brought to you from a foreign country as you talk about how bad foreigners are. I was like, Arasawa is interesting because in this moment, I'm like, yeah, speak your truth, dude. Speak your truth. But let's get rid of this tracking nonsense and go back to Arasawa for a hot second because he is interesting in here. So Arasawa is the first inspector at the top of the food chain. Imo Mia is the second inspector. And way down here, Sarazawa was the seventh inspector. And inspector is interesting because we have our inspectors up here that are being used by the Sybil system. I'm wondering if, just like how the Sybil system is using inspectors and enforcers, right, for investigations, if these inspectors are the Bifrosts, and Bifrost just has like 7 or 8 inspectors, that's all that they need to oversee all their activities, versus an entire division and network like Sybil system does. I mean, if you think about it, having only 7 or 8 inspectors in an organization, you have less people to manage, a more tightly coordinated group. It's like a SEAL team, basically, of assassins that go in there, rather than the inspectors in Sybil system that are just like big giant divisions where there could be more strife. Interesting. So yeah, I do like Arasawa just calling out these women's hypocrisy, then they get kind of uncomfortable. And he's like, oh, by the way, I'm the owner of this cafe. And then he says, yeah, Koichi Arusawa. Because it looks like they're about to complain. And then he leaves him that card. So all of these guys claim that they're the owners of things. Like, Arasawa claims that he's the owner of a cafe. And then we had Sarazawa that claimed that he was the owner of a transport company. Okay. And then we're going to get Homura in here. Homura that is the owner of something else. And we're going to get him on here. I don't know if Homura is an inspector or not. But Arasawa, he's like, case number. Yeah, he gets new mail. Case number, the case that they have there. Somebody emailed him. I'm assuming it's Bifrost. And then he gets the Shindo, the bios on Shindo K and these two. And he's like, okay. And as he goes into the shadows, of course he leaves the light and goes into the shadows. Subtle psychopath. And he's like, first inspector, I'll resume my duties as floorman. So it's like he talks into a Bluetooth. I don't know who he's talking to, but he also says he's going to be floorman. Okay, so I want to look at what a floorman is. So a floorman supervises the gaming tables in a casino. Oh, he was responsible for safely and efficiently assisting. Well, it could be that a floorman assists the driller by performing manual tasks such as supporting the operations. But yeah, if I'm doing a floorman in a casino, he is the middle manager in a poker room. Their responsibilities vary somewhat from casino to casino, but they're generally focused on monitoring the games and assisting customers with any issues which relates to play. Oh, okay. So basically, he's the middleman. Wherever the Bifrost candidates are, it's like between them and the people involved in the case. He's the man that makes sure that everything runs smoothly, which explains why Imamiya was so unsuspecting, because they're like, I ain't got nothing to lose. I'm just a middleman. I'm not the one involved. I'm just here to make sure everything runs accordingly. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And then he just walks off and these ladies are like, what the hell? Who you be? Interesting. Okay. So Shindo is watching the video of Kamiya that the world is full of... Oh, this is so interesting. So she says the world is full of people in need, but I want to help my neighbors first. Meaning that's a nationalist vibe where she's like, yeah, the world's in trouble, but let's take care of ourselves first. That it sounds very nice and everything, but there's some kind of nationalist undertones there. She's like, those I can reach out and touch. Meaning the people here in my own country are what count. Y'all outside the world, screw you. Which is going to come into why she's anti-immigrant, because she's like, they're coming in from the outside and she's like, oh, we got to take care of Japan first. We can't take care of anybody else. Screw them, poor them. That's the government I want to create. So Hinakawa's like, well, this speech is a live broadcast though, isn't it? And they're like, yeah, it's live. We didn't see a lot of Kisaragi until now. This episode, she kind of was absent the last episode. I feel like they don't really have much to do with her right now, which is fine. Kunazuka's coming back next episode, so she may become even less of a presence. But direct appeals are more effective since they influence the citizens' hues. Remember how back in season 2, like 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I guess it was like 5 or 6 years ago in this world, how having public rallies was like a big deal and how affecting people's hues was like a national priority? Sybil system has slacked a lot, I feel, in these last several years. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I was like, the fact that Kasai is noticeably absent from this episode and this series so far is noted, because I felt like throughout season 1 and season 2, Kasai was like always right there. Sybil system was such a constant and a presence. And in this season, they're like in the background. Like we're not even supposed to notice them. And instead, this Bifrost thing is a player. So I'm like, what do we do with that? But yeah, like a few years ago, Sybil system would have freaked out if there was like a national press conference or a national like rally with people talking and people's hues getting affected, like they would have freaked out, but now they're just totally fine with it. They're like, no, we're good. They're like, it's fine if it affects their hues. Because they're like, okay, there's different priority levels and they're still in priority level 1. The neighbor party was formulated by the affirmation party, endorsed by the neighbor policy by the affirmation party. So yeah, so this neighbor policy is basically like a nationalist thing. We're not going to help anybody else except ourselves. Okay, they just want to regulate immigrants and protect their interests. Yes, that all makes sense. I like that he yawns, and then Shindo comes into view, and he's like, wow, you're politically minded, Eerie. He's like, Eerie, of course, would find interest in this because Eerie is all about kind of protecting the underdog. And in this case, the immigrants are the underdog. So it might also be why Kay is kind of like okay by them because they're like, whatever. Okay, on Shindo's desk, there are a bunch of Post-it notes everywhere of like word bubble Post-it notes, everything. I don't know what they're saying. They're all, I don't know if some of them are saying English. I don't know what some of them are saying, but there's like it looks like maybe a head, a face with a mustache or a butterfly in its mouth. Is it supposed to be like Silence of the Lambs? And then there's like some books and a pipe like Sherlock, which, surprise. But he starts to try to use his mental trace on her, and he kind of has a moment where it's too much. And he gets cornered, and it's like he's at a concert, and it's too much. He's trying to go too much and too deep without Kay being there. And then he looks over to see her, and he can't do anything. Also, like, her form when she's like a idol is kind of like She-Ra, kind of like Power Woman, which is interesting. But yeah, he can't get a good read on her. And then he freaks out. And I'm a little concerned by Shindo's ability, putting him in a near coma. A little concerned about that. A little bit. I'm also really amazed. Shindo seems to be a lot like Akane, in a sense that he's had horrible things happen to his family and those he cares about around him. And rather than be messed up by it necessarily, it furthers his sense of justice. So like when Akane lost her best friend, when Akane's lost her grandmother, it didn't like make her snap. It made her more focused on the justice around her and being an agent of it. Which the whole idea that she killed someone is just insane. So because yeah, Genoza's alive, Kogami's alive, Kunozuka's alive, Sugo's alive, everybody's alive. Why did she try to kill somebody? Or is that just a cover-up that Sybil's system gave? We haven't seen Saiga, so was she forced to kill Saiga? And that's what happened? Did she have to kill him and it was like all part of the plan? I'm just gonna theorize blindly. But I feel like Shindo is like Akane in that he's using the deaths of those around him to motivate him to find the truth. Kind of like she did, right? I also love that Kay, like instantly Kay's like, I know how to solve this. And Shion's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm taking him to a car. And Shion's like, I don't think this is approved treatment. And he's like, bitch, you don't know me. So the idea that he takes it out, he's like, I'm calling him back, and he takes him to the car. And it's Shindo, he's like, I want to help my neighbors first. Those I can reach out and touch. And he's outside the car when he hears that repeated over again. And then Kay brings him back by being in the car. Interesting. And so he's like, you're quick to call me an idiot. You've been diving too much. Diving too much. I thought he said he'd been driving too much. But he's like, no, you're diving too much and it's starting to put too much strain on you. Now, at this moment, I will say that Yuki Kaji, there is a reason they hired Yuki Kaji to play Shindo. And I was when I found that out that he was his voice actor, I was a little bit intrigued because Yuki Kaji, if you've watched Attack on Titan, know the vocal range that this actor has. It is insane. And I'm like, did they hire this guy to play Shindo because he's going to like have this big emotional moment? Because Shindo's not a very emotional person. He's like Sherlock. And I was like, that's such a weird choice. But no, they hired him because Yuki Kaji is a freaking good voice actor. Like the moments where he wakes up and he's just like, he sighs and has these little breathy moments. I was like, oh, it made his character like 20 times more endearing. And it was the tiniest little thing. And I was thinking to myself in the moment, I was like, when he was like, oh, never mind me, look into Kamiya. Like any other voice actor, I don't know if they could pull off simultaneously the vulnerability of Shindo in this moment, but also like the kid-like likability of him at the same time. Because there's a character in Ace of the Diamond called Mei. Yuki Kaji plays Mei. And I feel like Shindo, especially when Shindo's kind of dorky, reminds me of Mei. So that's all I'll say about that character, because there's a lot of nuance there too. But I was like, oh no, Yuki Kaji's perfect for Shindo. I get it. I get it now. He can do the soft, vulnerable moments, but also be really upbeat and quirky. So yeah, I get it. But also the fact that the fact that Kei and Shindo are the same age. I mean, I could see Shindo being 24. I was guessing 22, 24 seems fine. I thought Kei was at least like 28. So no, he's a very serious young 24-year-old. I was like, damn. I'm like, girl, Mei, you got the right guy, because he is, I'm sad that you can't see him because he's very handsome and attractive. So, okay, I want to go here to Mika's scene. Mika is cracking me up season 3. I did not like Mika at all, really, in season 2. I would not care for Mika as far as I could throw her in season 2. I got her character. I understood it. I appreciated her being a foil for Akane, but I didn't like her character. And in the movies and Sinners in the System, I didn't care for her either. Because I was just like, girl, why you trying to be evil, but you're not evil? Stop it. Here, I am having so much fun at her despair. But okay, talk about addiction. So Arasawa telling the girls drinking tea in the cafe. Tea has caffeine in it, which is something you can get addicted to. I am horribly addicted to caffeine. To an absurd degree. But like, caffeine is an addiction. And so when he was suggesting coffee at first, I was like, well, that has more caffeine. Sometimes some tea has more caffeine than coffee. But I was like, that's just a stimulant too. So that's something to get addicted to as well, which is, as far as we know, you're not really supposed to be into that, because the civil system's like, you can get addicted, like alcohol and things like that. But here, I think that Mika has an addiction with the Pez. Because she gets the complaints. And she's like, Internal Affairs sent us a warning to stop interfering with the election. As of now, the death seems accidental. Like, I love she's just sitting there pumping out the Pez's. I'm like, is she addicted to the sugar and the Pez, and that's her own addiction? Is that clouding her hue? Who knows? Also, again, her drab black office and drab black uniform, but with the orange shirt that's supposedly a color for caution. What do we do? The thing that gets me, though, is that Mika is a little shit. Mika is trying to be goody two-shoes, but let's be real. Mika, she would be dirty and underhanded as long as she could get away with it. That's the thing. And so she's like, you boys are you're making me have gray hairs. You're giving me stress. You're going to get caught. Internal Affairs has complaints against me. Like, why can't you just solve the case without me having to get in trouble? And Shindo's like, but what if we spun it to where it seemed like we were doing something good and stopping a terrorist attack? And she's like, well, that's not proven, but it's an excuse, so yeah. She's instantly on board with it. When they pass it off as something they can get away with, she's fine with it, which is freaking hilarious. She's like, the precautionary investigation is permitted because we're preventing a terrorist attack. And she's like, we can run with that. Let's go. You know who she reminds me of? Oh my God. Mika is J. Jonah Jameson. Mika is J. Jonah Jameson from Spider-Man. We talk about Spider-Man. We talk about Shindo and that whole scene where he chases after the guy and he's literally Tom Holland. Again, Netflix adaptation. But Mika is J. Jonah Jameson. She bitches about the hero enacting justice because it gets in the way of her authority. And she's only okay with it if she can spin it in her favor. Oh my God, she's J. Jonah Jameson. It's over. Yep, Mika's that. I'm done. Get me Spider-Man in on this. Yep. 100% here. So yeah, they're like, was Tsuchiya's research that dangerous? And he's like, well, I'm not sure, but Mika knows that we can deflect complaints if we make it a priority. So yeah. So he talks about Camilla saying that it's frightening how fast her mind works, but it's empty. And she's like, no, what does he say there? He's like, her mind is really fast, but it's empty. Like it doesn't have any of its own agenda. And Kay's like, well, she seems ambitious, so what do you mean by empty? And he's like, no, a mind like hers could force someone to weigh their hue against their life. And then, what does he say there? And make them choose death. So basically, she has a persuasive personality that can make you do whatever you want to. You know what it reminds me of? Camilla reminds me of a character from Monster, the main antagonist of Monster, whose name I won't reveal in case you want to go watch that series. But in that series, the main antagonist, they seem ambitious, but they're really not. They're empty inside. They're very smart, very persuasive, very manipulative, but it's very subtle, and it almost feels like they're not even doing it when they're doing it. Yeah, she reminds me of the main villain of Monster. Interesting. This episode is just filled with revelations and mystery and what are we doing with it? But yeah, I feel like she's comparable to that person. Okay. And they're like the transport crash or our case. Yeah. Interesting. And he's like, well, if that's true, then she's connected to the truth that we're seeking. So they're like, she's a part of the puzzle that will lead us to answers surrounding the people we lost. So we have to solve this case and figure it out what's going on with it. The crazy thing is that the whole Bifrost thing makes it seem like, I feel like Shindo and Kay are just bystanders and victims of just a random case, but rather than them being part of the masses that just let the motions go and just go with the flow and just follow the system and they don't question it, they're the ones questioning the system, and they're the ones that could kind of crack open all this bullshit that's happening, right? So I feel like, here's my theory about Bifrost. I think Bifrost is another system like the Sybil system, except instead of the Sybil system being made up of all these like-minded brains forming this hive mind, the Bifrost is just like a gambling casino of people in power making decisions that run the world. Instead of it being like an objective system posing as the ultimate law when it's kind of a facade, the Bifrost is just like, no, we're all just we're just gambling on people's lives and this society, which is sadly a bit more realistic to real life than the Sybil system. So it's like AI versus human order. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes in this. But I'm already almost at an hour and I'm not halfway through this episode. This is going to be a freaking long discussion. So Shion is smoking a lot of cigarettes. A lot of freaking cigarettes and running some cross-referencing on the security. And they find out that the one person who happened to be at the hotel with Tsuchiya was Mr. Lee. Imagine that. And again, I love Shindo. He's so adorable and he manages to point out the obvious. And I love that he's just trying to show off in front of Shion. He's absolutely so cute. He's adorable, and Shion's like, if I liked boys, maybe kid, but no. I just love he tries to like flirt with Shion, and she's just like, no. So yeah, Kosuke Yakushiji's first secretary, Lee Aki, was staying at the hotel. Interesting. Yep. And so like, it's too much of a coincidence. So they go to the hotel to question him and ask him what's going on. And the thing about it is that, yeah, they were trying to get Lee to point out why he was there tracing Tsuchiya. I thought maybe, because when we saw Tsuchiya, he tried to get out of the room like he was being attacked, or maybe he was afraid someone was going to come in and try to attack him. So the question is, was the whole thing with Lee like a big red herring? Was it a big red herring and maybe Lee was going to question him, but then the guards like kept him from going to him, so he actually did leave, and maybe Tsuchiya, who was afraid for his life at that point, freaked out and ended up trying to escape, thinking that he was paranoid, thinking that he was going to get attacked by Lee, and ends up dying anyway, and Lee actually didn't have anything directly involved with the murder. I don't know. The sad thing is, we will never know. that's the problem, is that he pretty much denied everything and was like, well, you're awfully devoted to the candidate. And he's like, yeah, because despite having Sybil's suitability, many athletes have suffered setbacks. But he's like, Mr. Yakushiji is the one person who supports people like them. And he kind of compares himself to those athletes and says that Yakushiji is one that's going to that he's going to be rooting for the underdog. And if the underdog are immigrants, he's going to be supporting them too. Whereas Kamiya does not seem interested in that at all. So, but damn, it's like we could have got answers, but no. And here's the thing. These characters, they looked like, I'm not joking. I said the conductor for Howl's Moving Castle, but the guys that came in looked like they're from Seraph of the End. With their outfits, right? With their outfits. And my dogs wanted me to play with this toy. Anyway, they are clearly wrestlers. Inomiya hired them to go in and kill him. They were strong enough to do so and escape and go back to the underground where they weren't going to be targeted. That part makes the most sense. But damn, that fight scene. The choreography. Psychopaths can't go without a damn knife fight. They can't go without a knife fight. That's not how this works. Also, the tie back to the season 1 episode where the one woman got assaulted and like brutally murdered, and the little robots were like back in season 1, they were big robots and they were like, hey, it looks like you're being assaulted. Might want to go to a hospital. Here, it's even more annoying because it's these little tiny little floating spheres that are like Navi from Legend of Zelda. They're like, hey, listen, you're suffering from head trauma. You might want to do something about that. Listen. And the thing that's crazy is that back in season 1, there was a legit drone that could have possibly done something because it was physically there. Here, it's no longer a drone physically there. It's just a floating entity that can't do shit. And it's like, oh, that's even worse. So that is so crazy. And I love that Eerie finally calls it out and is like, yeah, no shit, moron. I love it. And that little thing's like, oh. He's like, I would if I could, you moron. And I love just the expressions on the little Chibi's face is so damn funny. I lost my shit. But yeah, poor Lee just getting his damn face smashed in. Okay, so yeah, the guys that are clearly wrestlers that Eerie and them, because he goes, who are you people? Oh my God. I can't believe that Lee got killed like that. So yeah, and he's like, their crime coefficient's 305. So interesting. But yeah, so I like that Todoroki gets stopped by Shindo because he was going to kill all of them. And Todoroki's like, we need to leave one of them alive so that we can question them. Even though they don't find anything out about him, I think that in Imamiya, to let those guys go there, knowing that the inspectors were probably going to use a Dominator and kill all three of them. So if that happened, then it's null point. Lee's still dead. He can't say anything and reveal that he was actually a red herring and wasn't involved at all. He can't reveal that information to them. And then also, you're off the hook because all the suspects are dead. Perfect crime. So I like that Shindo's like, no. Leave one of them alone. Don't kill them all. Let's be rational about this. We want to question one of them. Now, one does end up getting away. I'll be curious to know if we end up tracking that one down or if Imamiya just kills them and is like, yeah, you're a liability. No. And they go from there. So I don't know. Interestingly enough. Now, I want to see the ones that got away. So Kay goes after this one, and there's another guy that looks, he doesn't have the bangs, and he manages to get away. Poor Tima, though. He gets like all the racks and stuff falling on him. He's like, shit, I hate being old. Like, that sucks to be him. Damn it. But yeah, Shindo and them go through. I love when Shindo's like, let me just be Spider-Man for 5 seconds. But he manages to get away. But yeah, Kay can handle himself in a knife fight. Good for him. I love the flashlight trick. That worked really well. And he's like, we need to exercise human judgment. That's why the Dominator has a trigger. Love it. I love the idea. Yes. I love that idea. He's like, look, if human judgment was not part of the Sybil system, then they would just have the Dominators go off as soon as they saw a crime coefficient that was over 100. And that's so true. At this point, the technology, Sybil system is trying to prove that it's perfected. So it wants to have human judgment as part of its algorithm. So they're like, yes, they're like, dominators can malfunction because they're imperfect technology, but we need a human judgment to make it to where it's perfected, because the Sybil system is made up of human brains. So of course they believe that they're perfect, right? So I love that, though. I love the idea that that's why the dominators don't just fire. There has to be a human judge to make that call. So meanwhile, we have the ramen scene. We have the butter on top. It looks like there's an egg on top of the ramen and chives. It also looks like one side has the chives and it's all like kind of, I'm analyzing this ramen dish. You have the chives on one side that are all split up, and then you have like the pure white egg on the other side. Seems like it's maybe symbolic somehow. I don't know. But yeah, so the breaking news is that Mr. Lee Aki was assaulted and brutally murdered. Not a lie. And so the killers announced the crime online. So meanwhile, we have Obata. Obata has this little teddy bear as she's like messing with the screens. I don't know how Obata got this gig and why she's letting Arazawa like just eat his ramen there. It's weird. And there's the diagram that's on there at working, like the Bifrost. Are they inside the little diagram? I don't know. It's so weird. Now, Arasawa said his diagram, so is Bifrost his creation? But he's the floorman, so much mystery. There's still so much unsaid, right? So yeah, the killers announced the crime online and allegedly committed hate speech against Mr. Lee's ethnicity. So we know that Arazawa has the reaction that he does because he realizes that Imamiya acted rashly in doing this murder and didn't get things approved through him. So he's like, what the fudge are we doing? So why are you doing this? And that's why he like shoots out the ramen as he's eating it. Yeah, he eats like the whole bowl at once and then like barfs it up. Like, what, are you serious? And I love that she is just like, that is filthy. Azusawa, you scumbag. She's like, quit throwing up food in my house. I love her. I don't know anything about Obata, but I love her already. This like gothic. She's like if Misa from Death Note was just like an IT person. She is. She's like if Misa was a grumpy IT rep. That is Obata, and I'm kind of here for it. I love it. He's like, what was that for? Oh my God. Meanwhile, they're like, whose down card attacked the Yakushiji campaign? So someone's down card. So they're like, it's like they're playing Go Fish, but each of their cards represent elements that could interact with the case, right? It seems like it's like an element that'll interact with the case. So like, so who had the secret card where they attacked the Yakushiji campaign? Who was that? Whose down card did that? This is like Magic the Gathering, but I don't know the rules. Even if one of us stepped forward and claimed responsibility for the use of this, would you believe us? So now Lee is dead. He's out of the game. And then we see, okay, Imamiya, we see Inspector number 2 on there. Interesting. And they're responsible for Lee's death. Okay. Curious. But then the question is, which of the 3 called in Imamiya? That's the question. We don't know which of the 3 called them in because they're like, would you believe us even if we told you that it was ours? Interesting. Yeah, and he's like, invest in the public opinion control AI bots. So Shirogami wants to invest in public opinion control AI bots. And dealing with the relation block can wait. So they basically say, okay, we're going to wait on Division 1. We'll deal with them later. Shirogami says, let's get some public relation bots to weigh in. It's just like a social experiment. They're like, let's just get these AI bots to go in and see how we can mess up stuff. And see, because they're like, we want to know what the public opinion of this murder is and how it affects things. So let's get this going. I also bet on public opinion control. So we have this idea of public opinion control. so that the masses are going to control the outcome of this debate and see who's going to win. Interesting. And Homura says, I propose resetting the priority of the Public Safety Bureau of Division 1. Oh, so Homura, okay, so Shirogane wanted to just shelve them for the moment. We're not worried about them. Let's instead see about getting public opinion to sway one side or the other. Okay, we're going to talk about this in a hot second because it doesn't seem like their avenue worked. Because Homura was like, let's not leave Division 1 out of this. Let's keep them back in the game. And then, but then she, the Shoichi woman with the flower, she says, I object. The risk is too great. She says it could easily alert Sybil to our existence again. So Sybil System's been notified of their existence once, apparently. They don't want Sybil System to know that they exist or that they have a hand in this. But here's the thing. I have a feeling Kasai is in the background trying to find them out. Because if she knows they existed once, then it knows that they exist. And they're not going to stop until they find them. So, the fudge. But yeah, so it's interesting that Homura wanted them to not be forgotten, to make sure that they're in the forefront. But the other two were like, no, let's not draw attention to them right now because it may look too obvious. And they're like, I concur. And so it's like 2/3 majority. They're like, and so then Homura says, well, then I will dispose of the assets. So by disposing of the assets, does that mean, because she's like, oh my, it must be tough being the dealer. If you fail to dispose of them, round robin will take enforcement action against you. What the fudge is round robin? This is Bifrost. So what the hell is round robin? Round robin, are they the Kasai of Bifrost? And they'll take action against you? What the fudge does that mean? And then the question is, who are the assets? If Division 1 can't be involved, then what are the assets? Are they talking about Imamiya? Are they going to get rid of Imamiya so that they can't be discovered? I feel like that's what they're saying. That they're like, if we can't get Division 1 involved, then we need to get rid of the assets so that they're not questioned by Division 1. And that's why he's saying if you fail to get rid of them, round robin's going to be pissed. Whatever round robin is. And then Shizuka. Now, the fact that Homura Shizuka... I don't know if him calling him Shizuka is a sign that they're close or what that means. Also, compared to his dad, Homura won the lottery. The genetic lottery. Miyano Mamoru saw this character design and was like, sign me up. I don't even need to know what his role is. Okay, so then... here's the thing. So they decide to leave the Division 1, not worry about them right now, which I think may have been a mistake. And I think Homura knows it's a mistake, but whatever. And they decided to do, instead, this public opinion control AI bots to create these smear campaigns. And the one says, stand up, Japanese. If Gosuke Yakushiji becomes governor of Tokyo, then... and then they immediately go to, like, these money-grubbing, like, little skeletons. Foreigners will take they took our jabs! They took our jibs! And our rights. And then you see him, like, as a demon, like an ogre with, like, the world. And then there's, like, oh my god, like, the symbolism of this. He's an ogre, like an Oni. And he's got like a globe. And in the center is Japan. And surrounding it are these skulls that represent the death the immigrants are bringing to the country. Like the subtle, like, marketing is so genius. They're like, we must not allow the pro-immigrant faction to destroy our peaceful society. And there's, like, lightning strikes behind them, and he becomes, like, a demon face. Looks very much like All Might. Huh. You know what? The sad thing is, I've taken some visual rhetoric classes and marketing, and this is pretty on the nose. with smear campaigns. Once you figure out what a smear campaign does and you figure out the rhetoric they're using, they're very easy to see through. But if you have no clue what you're watching, they are very persuasive. And yeah, our peaceful society. And they're like, as I thought, online opinion is pretty unanimous that Karina Kamiya supporters are behind the attack. And then I like that Erie has like, he's got the tie undone, the shirt's undone, he's got bruises all over his face. He's like, I've been through hell, guys. He's been through hell and he's still milking it because he doesn't want to put his clothes back on. It looks like his suit was dry cleaned though. But Yakashiji and the eugenics party that endorsed him are welcome the anti-isolation policies after all. So yeah, they're all for people coming in and being helped. And he's like, to a thoroughbred like him, race doesn't matter as long as they have good genetics. Which is so interesting to say because there is still some elitism to that. It's just like, it's like he's willing to take you in even if you're an immigrant, as long as you have good genetics. As long as he's like, as long as you fit into the boys club, you can come in. It's, there is some fascism to that too, obviously, because both sides are awful in their own way, right? It's just his side, you know, has the rally cry of, oh, we'll bring you all in and bring you in from all around. Don't you worry, as long as you fit the mold that we want you to. But if you don't, and then hers is like, oh, well, we'll be a neighbor and kind as long as you fit the mold that we want you to. And if you don't, so it's like they're both equally bad. It's just, I feel like Yakashiji is more innocent and less suspecting than Kamiya because he seems like he's too dumb, but I don't know. I could be wrong. Yeah. And then they're like, all the corporate alliance. And then here's the thing. It's like Yakashiji has corporate sponsors like a wrestler would because the immigrants are cheap labor. But then her company, Kamiya's whole alliance, they're all pieces of crap. And I like that Kay is like, he, as an immigrant, he sees like the shit show that this all is, right? And I feel like, I think it's so important that we have Kay in the division and he's an immigrant because it gives us that perspective from his angle of how he sees things. And we'll talk about that whole scene in the hospital and that notion. But Mika's there being like, what's the likelihood that the Kamiya campaign is actually behind it? And Shindo's like, well, Kamiya's campaign manager was an immigrant. But I'm like, I would think that would be like, she's been with Miss Kamiya since she went independent. But I feel like Kamiya's assistant being an immigrant would mean that they weren't behind it. Because why would she want to support a crime against somebody that was an immigrant as well? That seems kind of hypocritical. A wee bit. And then what does he say there? He says she might be breaking the party line. Yeah, they're like, she might break up because of this. It's like, I felt like to me, that was a sign that Kamiya's party did not do the murder, even before we found out about Imamiya. Because if you have someone in your party that's your lead PR person and they're an immigrant, well, it almost seems like the assistant to Kamiya's party being an immigrant is like to appeal to the immigrant voters, being like, oh, well, I know she's talking about this neighboring policy and it seems like she's doing something that would like, you know, be kind of anti-immigrant, but my vice president is an immigrant, so I can't be that bad, right? So yeah, it, again, hypocrites, but it's probably just a front. The affirmation party tacitly accepts low-wage laborers too. Kay points it out. Kay is like, yeah, oh, and Kay has the little Russian nesting dolls on top of his computer like his wife. Oh, that's really sweet. Okay. I'm looking at all their desks. I like Kisaragi has like cats and perfume and makeup. Timma has like a crystal, like a snow globe and tissues and sake. And Erie's is just a slob desk that has ramen noodles. But yeah, So, but yeah, the marketing thing is so interesting. So the public opinion AI bots were just trying to like see if they could introduce chaos into the system and what would it cause? to happen to like distract or cause some more post chaos after the incident. But the polls have flipped and Komiya is at a disadvantage now, which I think is interesting. So right now it shows like before, I can't exactly read what that says, but it seems like before Komiya was like 63% of the vote, and now she's like 25% or 26% of the vote. It's like completely flopped. And there's still like an 8% and 3% for like other parties. So, which is interesting because I could see that happening because one, you have a giant immigrant voting population. So even though she has an immigrant vice pres, the moment that you have an attack against, it's very much like the downside of the smear campaign, right? Because one, the moment that you attack an immigrant, the immigrant voters are going to be like, oh, hell no, we're not going to vote for you because if you're behind this, then clearly you don't care about us. And your neighboring policy is only caring about yourself. So of course we're not going to vote. But also the smear campaigns from the public control or public opinion AI bots, those I think would also make it to where, what if I got like a little bug? I think it would also make it to where the people would think that she's being in poor taste because it's like, oh, you're doing this smear campaign against Yakashiji, but it's really tactless and gross. We're not for that. We'll vote for him instead because at least he's being, he seems sympathetic in this moment because he's lost Lee and he's grieving about it. So of course people are going to view him as a victim and him in a more sympathetic light and want to vote for him and view her as this, what a dastardly thing to do. So it's so interesting to see. And, have we seen such campaigns be successful in our own worlds? What? What do you mean an election between two parties that are both shit? What? What? Two hypocritical parties that are against each other and it being a shit show? Or what? I don't know what year is this? The severity of the realness of this episode hit really, really hard. And I was like, oh shit. Oh my God, what? So yeah, but Mika says Shindo's inspection was right on the money. And she's like, yeah, you said there was possible terrorism that could happen. And I like that Shindo's like, well, I'm not happy about that. He's like, I'm not happy about it because like people died. Whether perpetrators or victims is a tragedy. I am like 1,000 times on board with Shindo's perspective. And I think Akane would be too. Because I don't like the idea of, regardless of if somebody was responsible or not, the perpetrator or victim, people dying is still a bad thing. I'm not someone that's like, yeah, let's kill everybody. I'm like, no, I feel like there's so much to a story that even, I don't know. Maybe I'm just a pacifist. I don't know. But I do agree people dying, whether perpetrators or victims, is a tragedy. And it shouldn't happen. Yep, he's like, whatever the reason may be, there needs to be justice, suspense, but it shouldn't be death. And so the man that was arrested, his background's a total blank. And that's where Erie's like, well, I think I know where he came from. So then they talk about these abandoned zones that were excluded from the census, which amazes me about, because at first I was like, well, what about the blind spots? Why are we dealing with blind spots? What's going on? What's happening? What is this business? What are we doing? And then it hits us about like the concept of this whole thing. I'm going to get rid of this bug. So hold on just a second. Somehow a tiny praying mantis ended up in my room and I was looking at it like, why is that here? So I had to go turn it loose. Okay, so we're back. So yeah, so we talk about these blind spots that the street scanners have, right? And at first I was like, why would Sybil Systems still have these? Because I thought that was a big deal with Kamui, that we didn't want this blind spots. And they're like, can latent criminals really operate openly in such an area? And they're like, well, they shouldn't be able to break into a hotel. It's really suspicious, but that's where the inspectors come in. And so like Yakushiji has 3 campaign offices, and that's where they narrow it down to where they can. And I like that Erie knows the streets. Erie is like, he is literally, again, like Kogami. I compared Kogami to Dodger from Oliver and Company back in season 1. Erie is like that. He's got Sasayama. He knows the streets. He knows where they came from. And he knows that they're in this central part, Mio Gadani. And he's like, the abandoned zone that was your old stomping grounds. I love that image of him looking at the screen through the scanner. And he's like, yeah. He's like, that's it. So I just love it, again, have this like a Blade Runner feel where they clearly practice martial arts. And they're like, normally it's under the civil system, but there's a place where it is the usual. I also love that the little tiny civil system bots come out and they're like, systems lost, signals lost, don't go any further, you could be in trouble. Like, again, the civil system knows that there's areas where the signal doesn't work anymore. And they're like, but why would you have this if you can't use dominators? Doesn't that seem like a problem? And of course, it's represented with a giant green skull. And so they go in there where the combat arena is, and they use human on human combat, which is not like the machine on human combat. But they basically describe the creation of ghettos, is what they talk about, right? Yeah, this idea that you have this segregated area where you can keep all of the bad guys in this area that's very easy to control because you can just monitor everything. You can make sure it doesn't get too crazy, but then you can also ease the public from being like, because here's the thing, I think Civil System over season 2 figured it out, that they can't have everything be perfect because then eventually there'll be cracks in the veneer. Eventually there'll be cracks in the vase. You can't have a perfect system where nothing goes wrong, because then when something does go wrong, it's a big problem. So instead you have manageable areas of error. You instead gather all your problems into this area where you can monitor it, where you can establish boundaries, but also it will make the collective hue better for the people outside of that area because it gives them peace of mind knowing, well, we don't live in the bad area. We live in the good area. And we're okay because the bad's all over there. Right? That's kind of what it is. It's like, oh, well, there can be no bad here because we're not the slums where all that happens. We have all the homeless folks over here. We're fine. And I've seen that in so many big cities where you have places that people are like, oh, that's the bad part of town. And that's where you don't go. And then the police monitor that area and everything. It's all maintained and kept there. But then 2 streets over, it's like luxury. It's like, oof. It's, again, this episode's so real. And I was like, ah, damn it. Okay, also, Imami is amazing. They are animated so cool. I love it. The underground champion. If Yakushiji's the public champion, here's the underground one, Imamiya. I love the description. Broker of the abandoned zone, Haruki Inomiya. And they're like an ex-pro athlete and an ex-woman. I was like, we got a trans person in here? Yes. But they're not, they say they use they as the pronoun, so they seem non-binary. But they're like retired in disgrace after overusing male hormones and body modification. It makes it seem like they're trans mass, but they go by they. I freaking love Inomiya. Inomiya's design, the red, the lips, the cigar, I freaking love it. Their hue deteriorated due to body changes and a poor record. But they built themselves a castle here when they left center stage. Shindo's like, sounds like our culprit. Shindo is like having such a great time. I also like that throughout this episode, if you notice Kei and Shindo, they are often on opposite sides of the room and on opposite sides of everything. So I don't know if that's supposed to seem like a red herring that they're actually against one another, but they're working together. I don't know if it's trying to make everyone think that or not, or if it's just showing that they're like watching each other's back. It's interesting. But yeah, but then they just decide they're just going to go ask Inomiya what's going on. They're just going to go up there and question, and we're totally fine with all of this. And Shindo's like, well, why not? If they got nothing to hide, let's do it. The moment they walk in and we see Oishi and all this, and there's like torture devices and brains in bottles, and it looks very disturbing. I was like, is the brain in the bottle like a abandoned one that Civil System didn't get their hands on? It's kind of creepy and crazy. And Oishi seems to know Eri from way back. And he's like, oh, I almost felt like Oishi was maybe jealous and envious of the fact that Eri got out and isn't forced, because we see that Inomiya is kind of like not afraid to make them do horrible things to themselves, which why I'm sure that that person that escaped has not gone back there, because Inomiya would kill them. So interesting. And they just waltz in there. They got out surprisingly. The most unrealistic thing about this whole episode was that they got out of there scot free. Like, did not have a run in. I was like, they're gonna get their ass kicked. The moment they walked by all of the guys in the bar, I was like, that is intimidating as hell. And I don't feel comfortable. I feel like there's gonna be a bar fight and they get hurt. But Inomiya is not trying to make any waves. So they're like, oh, well, you guys, are you suspecting something of us? No? Okay, then get out. There's nothing for you to have here. Now, the one person in the shadows, like, I like Inomiya has the big long table and the bench and everything, and their person's on the other end in the shadows, like, waiting to mug somebody from behind. Are you unaware of where you are, or are you just that confident? I love their design. It's great. But you got nerve, and Shindo's like, yes, we're not idiots or overconfident. We're just questioning suspicious people. And they say it's the detective's job, and that one's the person stands up, and they're like, Osamu, sit. Now, Osamu looks like a robot. I don't know. Osamu seems like a robot. They're freaking tall. Maybe they are a robot. I don't know. She said sit like a dog, so maybe they're just a robot. Eri seems kind of like not happy about them either. But yeah. So Inomiya is a good poker face. They basically are just like, yeah, sure, whatever. And they talk about all of their men being basically like circus animals. I love their design. The design, like the pale ashen face, the wrinkles, the red eyes with like the sunken in and like the purple lips, and the long black hair and the red pops of color. Oh, the character design is just awesome. It's so freaking cool. I love them. So yeah, they send them on their merry way, and basically, you know, says to the end to Eri, you used to be the sharpest man we knew. And I love that when Eri like puts out the cigar in his hand and he's like, look, I'm still tough as nails, you wench. And then I love the expression that Inomiya gives him, like, all right, you can come back anytime. Like, ah! Inomiya is so freaking cool. I love them. I want them in the series more. They're fascinating. Yes, please. But then it's like they go to the ramen shop. I loved when we cut straight from Eri being so badass in front of Inomiya to them like soaking their hand in the ice bucket. That was so funny. I love it. And I love that they're all at the ramen shop being like, Inomiya is a suspect, but are they the mastermind? And Shindo's like, no. They're just, you know, in it. I also like that Shindo constantly gets, they constantly get overly full, and then they just fall asleep on people. Their main thing is they fall asleep on people. It's not just getting overly full. They just fall asleep on people. That's like their main MO. It's so good. But yes. So how did they send attackers in the urban area and avoid the street scanners? That's question one. Someone clearly is hacking for them. Maybe it's Obata. Obata could be hacking for them, letting them in. What is in it for Inomiya? Inomiya wants to bump up to first inspector because apparently there's a pecking order with Bifrost that you can rise up through the ranks and be first inspector. So Arazawa is in charge. How this Magic the Gathering game works that we don't know about, we're going to find out eventually. We're getting more pieces to the puzzle, interestingly enough. So yeah. So like, long time no see, second inspector. So then on the rooftop, these two get together. And this part was interesting. So, like, you have to be busy. So he called he called them to the roof to have this conversation. Feels very Blade Runner. Says, you have to be busy. And he says, don't play innocent. You're the one that basically killed Lee. A congressman included me in their plans. So Kamiya, I'm assuming Kamiya hired Inomiya? Is that what they're saying? Because they said part of the relation. So they know about the case, right? And Inomiya says that a congressman involved me in their plans. So Kamiya probably had them involved, right? Or was it the Todoroki family wanting to get rid of Lee? But I don't know why they would do that. And he's like, I know. And I'm asking about your sloppy execution. And like, I just imitated the first methods. And he's like, oh, well, that was nothing like mine. I always ensure my target finishes themselves. Okay, so basically, Aruzawa might have been involved in Tsuchiya's murder because Tsuchiya killed themselves. Also, Aruzawa, if we're going by that logic, could Aruzawa have been involved in the deaths of Shindo's dad? That's tied to Akane somehow. I don't know. Akane and Aruzawa and Shindo's dad might all be connected, if that's the case. And he might be the reason that Tsuchiya killed himself. Might be connected there. Okay. Interesting. But we don't know for sure. He's like, what I do is art. What you do is a half-baked copy. I think that Mikishima would like Aruzawa. Mikishima would like Aruzawa. He'd be like, okay, all right, artist, we're talking about coffee and tea. You got some Madeleines? We'll go. Although Mikishima seemed to like tea more than coffee, so maybe he wouldn't like him. I don't know. I feel like Mikishima might think that he's a little bit... Would Mikishima think he's elitist? I don't know. And then that's when Inamiya says, are you getting anxious? Are you worried that I'll steal the rank of first that you worked so hard for? I don't know what that means. He's like, well, hardly. I would never. And that's when he seems to figure out something. So does he think that someone in the Bifrost has hired Inomiya because they know Inomiya is trying to take Aruzawa's position, and he figures out that this is just part of the game? Is that what's happening? And he's like, oh, I don't have to worry about this. This is just a card in the hand that's being dealt. They like played Inomiya card, and then they're acting against me, but they don't realize it. And he's like, that means... And he's like, that's what this is about. That it's just part of the game. And then he leaves, and Inomiya's like, well, what? Did you find out and figure out what you came here for? Azusawa, not Arusawa. He's like, I've heard enough. I know how this incident will end. And he's like, I'll start the cleanup. So does he know that Division 1 is going to get involved and are trying to find out the people that are involved? And so he's like, I'm going to start cleaning up by getting rid of your guy that's on the loose and getting rid of all the loose ends. Just enough info, but not enough info. That's the name of this season so far. Damn it. I do love that shot at the end where Inomiya is just watching him walk away. I don't know if Inomiya is going to let him just do the cleanup, or if Inomiya is going to get involved, or did Azusawa say that to get their goat? Did he say that to get them to get involved? There's too much manipulation going on. There's too much happening at once. Then, this is the most random out there scene in the entire episode. The scene where we're at this estate in the city, this big estate, right? Okay, wait. Is that estate? Was Mikishima there at the beginning of season 1? Was that the facility where the people that are dying from the one disease? We haven't heard about the psychopath Hughes disease anymore. Is this the same facility like where people were dying at? Or is this just a random mansion? Because we see him like having all these monitors hooked up and these like halo things. And he's like, you're advancing successfully. And he's like, yes, Father. And he says, as you should, I raised you to win. And he's like, discard any emotion that gets in your way. And win at any cost. If it helps you to win, you should even use your own life. Huh. I'm fascinated by this because that old man, I mean, Sybil System's not been around that long, has it? How long's Bifrost been around? How long has he known about this system? Why is he telling him to win? What is happening? How hot was Homura's mom? Like, these are important questions that need to be answered. I also want to know about this dog that's there as well, because the dog is really freaking cute. So yeah, so then it like, okay, going back, there's like, this is like a hotel, right? There's all of these like statues of astronauts, maybe? The fudge? It looks like a hotel lounge because there's like chairs everywhere and stuff like that. Yeah, it looks like a hotel. Like he's leaving a hotel. I mean, is it a care facility? Is this a psychological care facility where he's gone to see his dad? Maybe. Yeah. And then the guy comes up and he's like, sir. He's like, excuse me, but this area is for the owner's personal use. And then he says, Shizuka Homura. And it's the Foxes. Tokyo Grandeur Hotel. He says, I am the owner. But then here's the thing. The guy goes, no, I believe it's someone else. And he's like, as of today, I'm the owner, and I invite you to confirm it. Huh. But then we have, again, these elephants and the bookshelves and all of these. And I'm like, is this tying back to season 2 with Kamui and the house that was like using all of the immigrant? That was talking about immigrants too. Oh shit. Where they were talking about the people made from the immigrants. The statues, the taxidermy made from the immigrants. Ah. Okay. I want to know how these Fox members are getting access to owning these businesses that they clearly didn't own before. How does that happen? How are they rigging the system to let that occur? Huh. And then they go back and there's this big round table. And Homura's at this round table. And he says, I'm going to survive. Huh. And then there's this tower. But that's not the same tower as Sybil System. I'm so curious. I'm so curious. There's so much mystery. I'm like, come on, show. What are we doing? So then, Maya, there's so much happening in this episode. I swear. So they see an optometrist, and she's talking about this ocular prosthesis won't allow your wife to regain her eyesight ordinarily. And they're like, with the latest surgical techniques, however, the success is highly likely. So like, yeah, we're going to do this little surgery and get you your eyesight back. I'm like, I want her to be able to see how hot her husband is. We're going to have the best staff for the wife of the Public Safety Bureau inspector. Oh. And she's like, I know you have work. And as they're getting ready to leave, they're like, how long do I have to wait? This guy speaks up. And they're like, please wait your turn. And then he gets mad and asks why Kay got Saul before him. And you know what sucks? You think to yourself, you're like, wow, this asshole and his actions, and everyone just looking in contempt at Kay and his wife, who he's just trying to help her get her sight back, and this guy looks like he's perfectly fine. I'm like, you would think that his like kind of racist and anti-immigrant sentiments would be pretty exaggerated. But the problem is, no, this shit happens all the time in real life, and it's stupid. And this show shows just extremely how horrible it is when you have a character like Kay and his wife who are so innocent, and these people are just being complete assholes to them. Like, it's no, and Kay is just kind of like, hey, I have a job, I'm here, and he tries to flaunt the fact that he, like, you know, is trying to be in the Public Safety Bureau for this man's benefit. And this man's like, well, they'll just let anybody in now, won't they? And him and his wife have to deal with that. That's so horrible. I felt so bad for them in this moment. And Kay's, like, anger is very understandable. Because he's like, I'm trying to protect you and trying to do right for my wife. And y'all are being assholes. Like, why? So, yeah. So then, and he goes to, like, the briefing. I love he has little Russian nesting dolls, which I think also speaks to, like, the layers in Kay's character that we're seeing that are starting to come out, which is really nice. And so, like, okay, if we start by saying Inomiya is going rogue, I like that we should get the Abandoned Zones cooperations. I like that Eri and Shindo are, like, influencing each other and, like, doing their own. They're doing their own Bifrost in moment. That's what this is, too. This is like a mini version of the Bifrost that they're doing. They're basically coming up with these scenarios being, okay, if we play this hand, what's going to be the result of that? But if we play this card, what's going to be the result of that? They're literally doing a mini version of the Bifrost. There's even Timma sitting there in a triangle with them. what? Like, if we reach an amicable resolution, and they're like, I'll get to gathering intel around the abandoned zone. And Shindo's like, I'll go with him. He's like, I knew you'd say that. And he's like, oh, yeah. And so he's like, well, then Todoroki and I will investigate the victims. And Todoroki's like, well, I don't want to go. My family's there. And he's like, well, you'll probably notice if something's off by your family going there. And they start to question him, but Kay's not in a good mood today. Today is not a good day for Kay. He's like, nope, we're not going to do this. We're just going to keep going. A black cat walking by too. What bad luck could that have been? I do like this moment here where the three girls, I want to point out real quick, they're wearing the green, the red, and the yellow. I have no clue if this is coincidence or not, but they remind me of in Beauty and the Beast, the three women that get carried by Gaston. They're blondes in that one, but they're wearing green, yellow, and red dresses. So I'm like, is this like a play on that? Because like, well, you should come next time and we'll take care of that little boy too. And Shindo's like, yay, 3 girls to take care of me. I'm down for that. I was like, no, Shindo, you're too pure. Keep him away. But yeah, they end up going and investigating. And Shindo's like, everyone trusts you, don't they, Eerie? And he's like, I like the people here, so yes. And yeah, a lot of them are hopeless, but they're all full of life. Yep. And he says, I think so too. I love that concept of they're hopeless, but full of life. It's the idea of they don't think that there's hope for them, but they're still living their life to the fullest. And that moment where the light shines down on Eerie and it shines down on Shindo with the calico cat. Oh my God. Like, it's some of the best animation in the whole episode. I love it. It's amazing. Yeah. And he has the light. He's like, you became a forcer to protect this place. And he's like, well, you're a weird inspector. Meanwhile, Yaku Shiji is inconsolable because he's lost Lee. And they're like, we're going to arrest the perpetrator. And they're like, well, he's a victim. And then the one family is like, well, this place is no place for a latent criminal like you. And the way that they talk to Tenma, it just gets under Kay's skin. Because they're talking to Tenma the same way that he was talked to at the hospital. And they're like, you're just like my pathetic stepmother. Okay, so you're like my pathetic stepmother. So that means that Tenma and the one guy who's significantly hotter are half brothers. Okay, so that would make sense. That's why. So basically, the old man Todoroki, he had Tenma, and then he remarried real young, surprising no one, because he probably has money, and had the younger brother. That makes more sense. Or the younger brother was adopted, which would be even more sad, right? And so at that point, he says, since you've inherited inferior genes, I don't consider you my brother. You're just a latent criminal. Disappear like she did. And then, man, Kay came out of nowhere and it wasn't even a bitch slap. That was a punch. And it was like, ooh. And then he gets suspended until the bureau chief orders otherwise. Now, Kasai lets him back on the case. Here's the thing. Kasai lets him back on the case, and I wish we could have seen Mika talking with Kasai about it. But here's the thing. I think Sybil System knows that Bifrost exists, that Bifrost is doing something, and Sybil System's like, I can't quite figure it out, but these mofos can. So she's going to let Kay back on the case, because she knows that him and Shindo are going to be able to solve the crime. Their Lapeless is calling or whatever. They're going to be able to find the two Messi and Fox, and they need them to be on the case. Mm-hmm. So that's why he ends up passing. I think otherwise it would be a different story. And plus, he just punched the guy. It's not like he killed him, right? Your crime coefficient will need to be reassessed. But he clearly is okay. I also think that because he exercises so much, that's why he's okay too. Because when you exercise, it releases serotonin and stuff. It makes you feel better. So I feel like him and Shindo constantly working out help their hues. Doesn't help Ganoza any, but it helps their hues. Maybe Ganoza needs to be around Kay and Shindo more, and he would be better off. But whenever Kay says there is no, what does he say? There's no causal link between crime coefficient and blood relations. Well, go find Ganoza and tell him that, because he probably needs to know that. Not that he cares anymore. And then, yeah, he puts his coat back on and heads out to go. Yep. The fan blade swinging. His remarks were not in accordance with Sybil. But he's like, I realized that I caused you harm, so I'm sorry. Freaking love Kay in this. I love all of these characters. This episode like made me love and respect all of them. Kisaragi is the weak link for me. Kisaragi is the one character right now that I'm not sure about because I think she's okay. She makes me a little bit suspicious because we saw her steal that card from the first episode. So I'm like, is she going to be a secret inspector? Is she trying to like rise up through the ranks too? And is she working from inside? I noticed that she's not really involved in a lot of these cases. And I think maybe there's a reason for that, but maybe she's working behind the scenes for Bifrost. I don't know. She's a little suspicious to me because we've not seen her in action, but maybe the show just hasn't had anything to do with her. Meanwhile, Hinakawa's like, hey, I finally found some intel for about the guys. And like, if they investigate, we latent criminals will just get roped in. More importantly, they're like, nerdy kid, calling him that. Aren't you done checking on them yet? And he's like, yes. So Arata Shindo, age 24, a special A-class profiler with high empathetic abilities. So he's born on February 11th, right? Is that correct? Is it February 11th or is it November 2nd? He's either an Aquarius or Sagittarius? Scorpio? No, or Scorpio. Him being an Aquarius would make a lot of sense to me, but we'll see. But yeah, blood type A. He's recommended for the assignment by Akane Tsunemori. The killer ex-inspector. And I love that Hinakawa says she's a great person. Yeah, there is so much to the story about Akane we don't know, and I will be patient and I will wait, but it's so crazy because I'm like, did she kill somebody? Really? Because Tim is like, I heard she lost her mind. I heard she was a top-notch inspector who lost her mind. Who knows? But his mother chose euthanasia due to illness when he was young. Okay, so she was sick and she chose to euthanize herself. Well, that's oof. And the dad committed suicide. I don't think he committed suicide. I think it was covered up because he was a Ministry of Welfare official. And the information is restricted. So Shindo is the spoiled rich boy, right? He's like, I can't retrieve the information. And they're like, I'm amazed his Q didn't cloud, but he did say a mentalist can keep their hue clear. Seems a lot like Akane. Then we have the inspector. Okay, so it is January. Okay, so he was February 11th. So he's Aquarius. And then a K is a Capricorn, which that tracks as well. But yeah, so his blood type is O. Interesting. So he's a little bit older than Shindo. He's a Russian naturalized Japanese. Okay. Military training from his home country, which explains the nesting dolls. He excels in shooting, combat, and analysis. Recommended by Chief Shimotsky. Interesting! So Mika recommended K. Akane recommended Shindo. And they just happen to be working together as a pair. There's something going on under the surface, bitches. And I don't know what it is yet, but we're going to figure it out. Yep. And he was married. Yeah, he doesn't talk about it or he wears a ring. Yep. And then Maya. Visually impaired and undergoing treatment. So pretty. Oh, so he lives together with his blind wife? Yes, Kisaragi, that's what it means. His brother, Akira, was naturalized but died 2 years ago. So that's interesting, too. So the brother died 2 years ago. I'm wondering, and it said the brother 2 years ago was killed by the dad of Shindo before he committed suicide. It sounds to me like whatever incident happened with Akane also involves the dad of Shindo and the brother and Mika and Akane and all them. It's all connected. Everything's connected. I'm wondering if whatever went down with Akane happened 2 years ago, which would be a year after the last Sinner Systems movie. We're placing this timeline together, bitches. We're getting this timeline organized. It's all starting to add up, right? Right? What kind of relationship is this? Oh my God. The surviving family of a killer and his victim become a buddy team. It's out there. And there's a reason they stick together. Yeah, I think the reason is they both know that the whole situation with their family members was set up. And they're trying to find the truth of the matter, right? Trying to figure out the truth. And there, meanwhile, we get Timma's like, we got so many like little side stories that made me love these characters even more. So Timma, we talk about genetics. Timma being obsessed with Yaku Shiji's whole thing about genetics is all tying back around to him because according to his family, he should have been born with a genetically perfect psychopath. And then we see the dad in the flashback saying, are you saying it's my fault? And we see the mom. And so the idea of like psychopaths and genetics is just crazy. But I mean, Masaoka and Genoza kind of, that was all hinted at back all that time ago. And then the correction center, we see the brother, right? And that's why the mother makes a difference comment. That's what it is. Because I was like, when he said that at first, I was like, but you all have the same mom, don't you? But they don't. And then he finds out that the one mom, that his mother committed suicide. And the way he just says it so casually, he's like, oh, your mom died last week. I was like, oh my God. Like, that brother's such an asshole. Like, what the worst person. How bad. And he's like, give me a break. And then we cut to the apartment. And what I love about it is the apartment shape where Kay live, it's like two step ladders, two ladders that are connected together. And it's Kay and Shindo and them eating together this beautiful meal. And then she's like, what on earth were you thinking? I love it. And I love the idea. They talk about a food printer. Like, how far have we come from food just being like randomly generated to having like a 3D printer for food? That's insane. And she's like, but they can't print my culture's meals for my homeland. I love that. I love the idea that she wants to keep making meals from her homeland. And so she gets the ingredients and everything and teaches herself to cook so that she can still enjoy them. I love Kay and his wife. They are so wonderful. I freaking love them. They're so sweet. And they have the little nesting dolls up there on top of the bureau. Oh. Meanwhile, outside of their like nice apartment, they have this like little like area where they're doing their working out. It's kind of insane. And they're like, well, you got back on the case. That means the civil system understands. I love that, again, Shindo's morals tie back around to Akane. Because Akane would be like, yeah, the civil system recognizes the justice here. Or at least it seems more in line of Akane from season 1, is what Shindo reminds me of. But he's like, the civil system let you back on the case, so it clearly thinks you're fine. And then he's like, I hope so. And then they talk about, is the case going well? And he's like, I'm missing a key piece of the puzzle. That's what it feels like. It feels like they're missing a key piece. Something's missing. And he's like, Kamiya is holding it. So Kamiya, we're going to go back to her. And they're like, there's going to be a final public debate. Of course there is, HERACLES, Kosuke. Yeah, the Sirens and HERACLES. Okay, the one thing about this whole episode, I've been waiting to talk about it. Show. What the fudge is with that angle of that crotch shot of Shindo? What? Look, I wait 3 seasons. You have Kogami, you have Genoza, you have Sugo, you have Kei, you have Eri, you had Masaoka. You had all the opportunities to give us a meaningful crotch shot. And instead, You gave us Shindo? What's wrong with you? There ain't nothing there. Wasteful. Wasteful is what that's called. I was like, that's not even fair. It felt wrong. It felt vulgar. It felt vulgar. I was not amused. Son of a bitch. So then they're like, okay, so there's these boxes here in the study there, and they're like, what about security for the debate? And they're like, Division 2 is handling it. Okay, so I was so thrown off by this random crotch shot that was unwarranted that we know now Division 2 is handling security of the debate. Which is interesting to me. Like, what are they going to be doing with that? And they're like, okay. And then he's like, are you getting enough sleep? Because that ability of yours relies on it. And he's like, aren't you suspended? He's like, I'll do anything if it means reaching the truth. And he's like, you're not the only one. Just don't do it when I can't hold your rope. I love it. He's like, I love that he's like, if you're going to go after the truth, we do it together. He's like, I can't see what you can. So at least let me back you up. I love it. I love the reflection in the glass. I love that he's like, look, we both want to find out the truth, but we have to work together. So you need me and I need you. Yes. He's like, aren't you suspended? And he's like, drop it. I'll get reinstated soon. I love them both. And he's like, why did you and I have to lose family? And he's like, that's what we're going to find out together. So Mai's lost her family too. Oh, I freaking love it. Then we have the after credits, right? Oh my God. Oh my God. Where it's like to fill in the gap left by, so it's like, okay, since Kay is out of commission, we're going to fill in the gap by bringing in this new inspector. I love that they're like, I've asked an investigation consultant contracted with the Bureau to join us. Just so happens to be contracted by the Bureau. Oh my God. The look of, she's like, I love that. And of course, Mika, idolizes Kunozuka. So she's like, yes, please, all about it. Then you look over, she's like, let me introduce her. You see Shion, the love in her eyes, where she's like, yeah, bitch, freelance journalism, bitch. That's right. You can freelance all over my brief anytime. And I was like, ah! I'm just like, yes, former Division 1 enforcer and current freelance journalist. Like, her hair is so much longer. Yes, get it, girl. Yayoi Kunozuka. Ah, bitch, please. I am so elated. Well, so I've talked for 2 hours about this episode. What a great birthday gift. What a great birthday gift. What an amazing birthday gift. Is this the longest I've talked about a Psycho-Pass episode? It's not that it was the most revolutionary episode ever. It's not like it was that. There weren't really, there were twists and turns, I guess, but it wasn't like anything like, oh my God, the ultimate twist. No, this episode just had a lot of pieces moving, a lot of parts at play, a lot of character development and character moments that I was like floored by, and just so much to talk about in terms of what works in this episode. Like, this is one of my favorite episodes in a long time in the series, and I'm kind of all about it. And this episode has made me get on board with every character, except Kisaragi. Kisaragi's the only one I'm kind of like, she's kind of fading in the background. And I don't know if I'm supposed to be suspicious of that or if they just don't have anything for her to do. She's in this little lineup. She's in the background looking so nonchalant. I don't know. Is Kisaragi going to be the kiss of death? We'll find out. But y'all, I'm so excited to see what we're going to get next week. Next week's the halfway point of this season, which is wild to me. But we'll just have to wait and see. So, in the meantime, I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I am so curious to know your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching this whole giant bloated discussion with me. But I'm so excited. So, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back real soon with more Psycho-Pass. Peace out, y'all.